Okay, so here we are. This is the new CTE teacher workshop. Hopefully, are you seeing, if you by the show us some thumbs up, are you seeing the PowerPoint presentation on your screen right now? Okay, good. Thank you for that. What we're kind of going to go over today is, the nuts and bolts of CTE. There's a lot of misconceptions, so I'm just going to take it at a very high level. What makes CTE CTE? I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about the different funding, and I'm not going to go too deep into the funding component, but sometimes it's important to understand the funding in order to understand why you have to do some of the things that you need to do for CTE. Then we're going to spend some time into the program requirements, the actual, okay, now what does this mean for you as a CTE teacher? What do I have to do? And then we'll wrap it up with, how do we show those things with our SIP self-review and the different audit process. But before we do any of that, can I just have you, I'm going to open up my chat right here so I can see it. In the chat, would you mind putting just kind of maybe your name and your district and how many years you've been in CTE? Just so I can see the range of, because usually at the new teacher workshop, there is quite a range. Some have, I have some seasoned teachers who come back just because they want to relearn because CTE changes all the time. I have a lot of first year, a lot of second year, a lot of third year. Oh, a lot of first year. So far, a lot of first year. And so it's good. 7th year, 6th year. Yep. 5th year. Good. 2nd year. CTE. Okay. So yeah, it's been around for a while, but CTE is relatively new. First year in CTE. Yep. 3rd year. A lot of teachers who have, been in teaching for a long time, sometimes when they enter into the CT world, it's like, whoa, there's a lot of different components. Sometimes it can feel overwhelming at first, but I trust me, once you get going at it, it's not too overwhelming. CT, and plus you have, great consultants and up here at the ISD and as well as at your district. So, okay, great. Thank you for that. So the majority of you are, first year, 2nd year, 3rd year. So thank you for connecting. This is great. I think you're going to get a lot out of today. So first of all, let's just go into CTE and Macomb. Kind of go back to the basics. Obviously, this is our state and how it's broken up right here. When we look at career and technical education and initiatives that come through, we're part of Region 16 for our federal grant, right? But each of these regions is broken up into CPEDs. This is Career Education Planning District. You don't necessarily need to know that or memorize that, but a CPED is a Career Education Planning District. Macomb, us, we are CPED 40. So if anybody ever asks you, or if you ever go to a PD and they ask you what CPED are you from, we're CPED 40. We are also clustered together with CPED 27, which is St. Clair, and the two of us make up Region 16 for our federal grant. But for all practical purposes, like our grant management, Macomb does. So I manage our grant for both Macomb and St. Clair. So really everything that you guys get, like you think of Macomb as like your hub, right? And you are CPED 40 and Region 16. So those are your numbers in Macomb. And there's where you see a lot of CPEDs throughout the state. Get going. Okay, so what makes CTE career and technical education? Well, first of all, you're in CT, so I don't have to explain but it's funny, sometimes I go out and I say, I'm a CTE consultant. And a lot of people will ask me, well, what is CTE? Like they don't know what CTE stands for, right? Obviously we do, career and technical education, because we teach in it. But career and technical education, it's more than just, you can't just call anything CTE. There's actually a process to become career and technical education. You have to apply. to be a CTE program through the state. So, and the reason I make that distinction is because I have had some districts who think that, well, this elective might look like CTE. It feels like CTE, but it's not actually part of an approved program that the state has approved. So even though it might be a nice elective that has career focus or a tone, unless it's approved by the state, it's not career and technical education. So how do you know if it's CTE? Well, all of you are because your teachers were here, but I would just want to make sure that you know this distinction is that once a district applies for a program to be a CTE program, and if approved, the state issues a PSN or a program serial number. Each of you on this call, your programs have a unique program serial number, and I'm going to show you where to find that. The program serial number is, it's anytime you're now an approved CTE program and you have a PSN, you are now subject to OCTE review and requirements, as well as my ISD review and requirements. And I'll talk about the ISD review. It's very different than the state. Mine's more like, hey, let me make sure all your stuff is together and point you in the right direction. So when the state comes, you're ready. But how you find that, and this is kind of going to be our first go-to where I want you to do something. But before you do, I want you to watch. There's a public facing, you do not need a login for this. This is a public facing site. It's called cetusreports.com. CETUS stands for Career and Technical Education Information System. Again, you do not need to know the abbreviation for that, but it is our CTE information system where all the data goes in. So if you're wondering about your particular program data, you're going to find it all at cetusreports.com. Now I'm going to take you live into CETUS reports and then I will give you a second to explore, but I want to show you a few things first. So this is what the website looks like. You guys seeing the website? Thumbs up if yes. Okay, awesome. So on the website, this little drop down right here, if you go to view programs, or that little icon, but down here where I want to point, because I'm not going to take you through this whole website. That's a whole different training and I don't want to overwhelm everybody. But I was just talking about, a CTE program and a PSN and it being an approved program. So if you're wondering, well, what programs are approved for my district, or how do I find out my PSN? If you go to cetusreports.com, you go to program details, this little drop down, and you're going to see secondary program taxonomy. And when you click that, taxonomy is going to give you a list. So if I click on program taxonomy, down here at the bottom, I can go now, I'm going to go by fiscal agent because the districts, your districts are the fiscal agents. And let's say I type in, I'll type in, oh, the Utica's too big. I'm not going to type in Utica. They're a big one to show, so it'll be too many pages. I'll type in South Lake. Okay, so as I start typing, the districts will populate. And I'm going to give you a minute to go pull up yours. So you're going to go by fiscal agent. I'm going to just pull up South Lake. And then when I run the report, you're going to see that it will load the district and it'll load that they have 3 programs. This is their PSN, so their automotive PSN and their marketing PSN. So I'm going to pause for a minute, and I'm even going to pause the recording for a minute because I want everyone to go down. I'll go back to the, well, here's the websites at the top, and I'll put it in the chat. You're going to go to cetusreports.com, and I want you to find, under program details, find your program, your secondary program taxonomy. And I will give you about 2-3 minutes to do that. Okay, so hopefully you were able to find yours. The other thing I'm going to point out, and the reason I'm taking you to this is because it will come into play a little bit later if you wanted to look up some other data. So I wanted you to know your numbers. So with this taxonomy, one of the things that you can do is up here at the top, and I always usually do this when I pull reports off this website, is this drop down where it says you can download it as a PDF. Sometimes that's easier to view and to work with. So if you want to take and download yours as a PDF, go ahead and just kind of hold it off to the side. But that's a nice tool to just, especially if you find something that there's a lot of pages to, you can download that. Now, before I get off CTIS and to go back into our presentation, there's a few other things that I want on this page that I want to kind of point out to you under program details. One of the things that I'm going to be talking about shortly is your instructional design. So I know some of you are like, well, what's an instructional design? I didn't get there yet, but I will be talking about instructional designs. This also shows a 3-year instructional design trend for your districts and your programs. So as you get your feet kind of wet in career and technical education and you start understanding, what your SIP code is, what your PSN is, what the requirements are, this site can be very useful because you then now having the power of knowing your numbers, you could go and you could pull historical record of how your program instructional design was laid out. You could pull student enrollments, how many students have been enrolled in your program over a certain period of time. So again, I'm not going to go into these reports because it's a little bit more than you need for right now. But for those of you who have been around CTE for a while and you do maybe know your numbers, this is a great way to go back and look at trends within your program over time. So I did want to point out that there will be a time when we talk about our CPIs and our Perkins performance, but not right now. And then there's also, if you wanted to go and see some of your funding reports for your buildings, those are all public facing as well. So I just wanted to point those out. Those are there, but again, it's not really something that we need to go into today. So let me go back to our presentation here. Make sure I'm on it. Okay. Are you guys seeing the PowerPoint again? Yep. Okay. Okay. So, one of the things, so CTE programs, the other kind of really base understanding to understand CTE is the difference between a CTE program versus a CTE course, okay? So a CTE program can be, it's like a compilation of courses that can be taught over 1 year. They can, your program can be a 2-year program. Some programs I've seen are 3-year programs, but CTE, and then each of those programs fall into what is called a defined SIP code. And I'll talk about those. Now the state defines, so the Office of Career and Technical Education, and you'll hear me call them OCTE. So the Office of Career and Technical Education is kind of our governing body up at the state. So OCTE, they define, the standards for each SIP code. So they'll say, let me take marketing, for example. They'll say marketing, these are the standards in what should be taught in every marketing program, right? So they give you the standards, but then it is the district who defines the courses that those standards are delivered. So a district could say, well, I'm going to do these standards first, and then I'm going to teach this standard. Another district might do it a different way. So the state doesn't say exactly what order or how you have to teach, but they do tell you, and they do dictate what standards overall need to be part of a program. And then the district defines how those standards are laid out. So I'm a visual person, so I created this slide to kind of help better see, how this looks. So if I was going to go back to that marketing example, if I have a District X, they have a marketing program. This one at the bottom, District Y. District Y has a marketing program too. Now the state, the SIP code, this is the classification code. So the SIP code for marketing that the state says is 52.1999 marketing. Same for district Y. All marketing programs in the state have the same SIP code because the state defines the SIP code, the classification code. So all marketing programs have the same code. All health programs have the same code. All law enforcement programs have the same SIP code. But what's different is, if you remember when I said that in order to be a CTE program, you have to apply for it. And once you are granted it, you get a PSN. So notice their PSNs are different. Each of these programs, District X and District Y, have their individual PSNs. Okay, Shelly, if I don't know, you lost audio, but that sounds good. I'll watch for you to re-enter. So they have their own program serial number, but let's just look at program X. So they're saying these segments, the standards. So OCTE, they say that they define them, there's always 12 segments. Every SIP code has 12 segments, and they're the standards, right? So District X says, well, we're gonna do standard 1, 3, 5, 7, 11, and 12 in marketing 1, which happens to be a full year course. Then we're gonna do segments 2, 4, 6, 8, 9, 10 in a full year of marketing 2. And then maybe we'll have the school store, those students who have completed these 2 courses. Then you have marketing Y that says, well, we have a marketing program as well. We're following this SIP code. We have our unique PSN. So we're going to do our segments a little bit different than our counterparts next door. We're going to do segments 1, 3, 5, 8, and 9 because that fits for our delivery. And we're going to do that in a semester, and we're going to call it small business. And then we're going to have a course called marketing, and we're going to do 2, 4, 6, 7, 10. That's going to be our heavy hitter course. Both of them are fine because it's the district who decides where the standards are going to fall. But again, it's the state who, like this segment 1 is the same standard as this segment 1. They're just doing it in a different way. Well, technically they're both doing it in their first year. But this segment 9 for District X, which is in their second year, is the same standard segment 9 as this course in the first year. So, you know, I'll kind of go back to this for a second when it says the state defines what those standards are, but it's the district that defines what courses make up the program, and it defines what segments are taught in what course. So this is just kind of the visual representation of that. So where do we put all this information? And the reason I'm going into this kind of detail to help you understand this is because this is one of the things that teachers have to fill out for their SIP self-review, is defining what courses make up their program and what standards are going to be taught. So how you show that, oh, Shelly, sorry, I should put her on the wait list. How you show that is through your gap analysis shows your standards. Your gap analysis shows your standards, and your instructional design sheet then identifies which courses and where those standards fall. So I'm going to show you an example of your, so this is an example of an instructional design, and we'll have time to play around with this as well. So you're going to be able to get into yours and be able to see that. But you're going to see that your instructional design, if you have, like I showed you the different, that it showed there was one where it was like really a 3-year program and one that was a 1 year by semester. So that District Y that I was showing you, they had a semester course called small business with certain segments tied to it. And then they had a marketing course over here that had some segments tied to it. The other one, they had kind of a 2-year program going on where they had a course that took the full year and then another course that took the second year. So you fill out the instructional design essentially that matches your length the program, right? And in order to get what those standards are, this is where your gap analysis comes in. Now I'm just showing you a quick little snapshot. I believe later I have you going in and finding your gap analysis for your program so you can actually see what it is, where to find it, and what your segments are. But this is what it looks like, essentially. That it'll say, you'll see there's the zip code on the top, there's the state defined information, and then what you'll see over here, I'm gonna move my stuff, these are the segments. You know how I was saying 1 through 12? All gap analyses, however you say it, they have your defined 12 segments and they're different. So for marketing, segment 1 is functions, foundations of marketing. Segment 2 is selling. Segment 3 is promotion and social media. Segment 4 is pricing. So you see how, you know, an individual district could say, well, we're going to focus on pricing and selling at this time, and district Y might say, well, we're actually going to go over economics and functions of marketing and social media first. So like you can construct this information in the order that works on your instructional design. But this is your gap analysis. So when we get farther into the, a little bit later, when we're looking at your individual information, and I'll show you how to actually fill out a gap analysis. But I just wanted to give you a screenshot at this time as far as this is what a standard gap analysis looks like. Those are the segments or the standards, and it's here on the instructional design that you would lay those out. So it's just a few terminology things that I wanted to hit up front regarding the courses and your standards and your instructional design. So the first portion of this whole training was really to break down some of the language around career and technical education, like your gap analysis, your standards, your instructional design, your program serial number, your zip code, right? So the next section, and really this is the part that, you know, for my new teachers, for our first year teachers, this is now you. This is your program. This is what all CTE programs have to have. They eventually will have to upload, and I'll talk about that, into a system in order to show the state that you have all these components. But this next section, this is really, you know, the meat and potatoes of the program, right? Before we were talking about what makes up a program and the data that surrounds a program. This is you, your day-to-day, you're in the classroom. This is things that you're, as a teacher, that you control. This is as a teacher, you report on and you keep sheets on. So for those of you who have been around CTE, you might remember, you know, these CO1, CO2, this is just kind of like section numbers. This is how CTE, OCTE classified things for our SIP self-review. And I'll talk about the SIP self-review, but these are SIP self-review sections, meaning that your program has to have data or have documentation to prove this. This is what makes up a CTE program. This is what it was as of last year. So if you came to any of my trainings last year, I categorized them like this because that's how it was. This year, OCTE has changed the naming conventions and added a few, not added, but broke a few of them out. So nothing is necessarily like a new requirement. The requirements look different. But they're all still there. So you'll see CO1 is still teacher certification. CO2 is still professional development. And I'm going to go through these. But now advisory committee is CO3 instead of CO6. C10 is now CO4 for program delivery, but then they broke out. So CO4, program delivery, work-based learning, and leadership, all three of these used to live under this one box. Now they just broke them out, okay? We've always had equity and access, now that's CO7, and we've always had post-secondary connection, now it's just CO8. So they've just kind of changed the order and renumbered them. Now you might be thinking, why in the heck did they have these in the first place where you're skipping all these numbers? The reason the old ones looked like this with all the skipped numbers was because previous to this version, there used to actually be 16 sections. Like those of you who have been, if a few of you have been in CTE for a few years, for those of you who have been around, you can walk down memory lane with me, and we used to not do any of this digitally. It used to be these giant binders, and they had 16 sections in them, and all of these sections had to be filled with all this stuff. And then they consolidated. This is what the consolidation looked like. So they just like eliminated numbers and moved things up. This is the next iteration. So from this point forward, and for my new first year teachers, this is where we're focusing. And I'm going to walk through all of these. That's literally the rest of our PD, because these are the components when I work one-on-one with teachers. And I know like next week, I believe I'm going to East Point to work specifically with East Point teachers. So I know I have a few East Point teachers on here. If that is you, I will be coming to you next Monday, and we will go through some of these components, but the new program requirements are all of these. So let's just get after it. Okay, CO1 is certified teachers. So in order to work in career and technical education, you either have to have one of these three things. There's really no exceptions. So you either have a standard CTE certification, which formerly was an interim occupational cert. So if those of you who are like, I don't remember, I had one of these, they're the same thing. They just changed the naming convention. The standard CTE cert, eventually the renewal, you'll eventually renew to the professional CTE certification. So this is certified teacher who has a teacher certification from a certified teacher prep program, right? So you either have to have a professional. Now, this is different than a teaching certificate, okay? I could be a certified math teacher and went through a 4-year degree program, and I'm certified in math, but that doesn't make me certified to teach mechatronics and CTE. In order to teach in career and technical education, I would have to have this CTE certification, which is an additional endorsement that you would get from a teacher preparation program. Now, I will say you can actually teach just have a CTE certification and not actually have a full teaching degree, right? They're not, a lot of times teachers will have both. A lot of our CTE teachers have both, or they have this one. Or you are not a certified teacher. You do not have a CTE certification, but the district has put you under an annual career and technical education authorization, annual CTE authorization. This is formerly our AOAs. Now we call them our ACAs. Essentially, the ACA, and I'm going to go through this, and I'm actually going to point you at the end. There's a link at the end of these slides, and you guys will get these slides. So you'll have all the links that I go through today. There's a link at the end that'll take you to the certification documents that I'm about to show you. Like if you wanted them and how, to know all about teacher certification, I'll show you where those documents exist, but I am going to walk through them here. So the difference between, these two. This annual CTE authorization, the district owns this. The district applies for it. These are for individuals who come from business and industry. And we have a lot of CTE teachers in Macomb. 32% of all CTE teachers in Macomb County are teaching under an annual career authorization, okay? Which means they came from business and industry, and they know, and they worked in that content area within the last 6 years. So in order to be eligible for an ACA, that person has to be from business and industry, and they have to have relevant, recent and relevant work experience within the last 6 years. Now, a district can renew, these were the changes that came through. A district can renew an annual authorization for up to 10 years. That's the new requirement. So they would apply for the first one, and then they can do 9 renewals of that particular individual on that ACA before that person would then need to go and get some type of certificate in order to stay. So you can teach on an ACA consecutively for 10 years. That was a big change because it used to be 6. Now it's 10. The other big change was they've clearly defined what recent and relevant meant as far as that work experience. So that's an annual career authorization versus professional CT cert. Either one of those is acceptable, but that is all. Like, you cannot teach in career and technical education without one of these. Okay, CO2, professional development. All teachers that teach in career and technical education are required to keep a record and to have SIP specific, meaning your content area specific, professional development annually, which is a change for those of you who have been around. It used to be that you need CTE specific professional development within a 5-year period. It has changed this year. So this is a new thing. I'm not misspeaking if I told you something in the past, because it used to be within 5 years. It is now changed to annual. It is the responsibility of the teacher or the lead teacher in that program. And I'll talk about that at SIP. Don't worry about that. You upload your professional development each year so the state can see it. But it is, the big thing is it's changed to annually. Now, what is this? What does it look like? What can your professional development look like? You know, that anything that's keeping you current with your specific industry. It could be different CTE integrations with academics to bring up, because remember, we can do that because if you're doing a professional development that is working with math teachers to identify math standards that can be taught in, let's say, CAD, or it can be taught in health, or it can be taught in marketing, that's very much, you know, content area specific for you. So it could be academic integration. I'll kind of leave it at that. I'm not going to go through all these. But one thing that is, I am going to provide, because this is a new one, you will need to upload in for your self-review. So what data do you have to keep? Like, what records as a teacher? Because that's always the question. Okay, that's great. I need PD. What do I need? What does it need to look like? So you're going to basically have you're going to upload your, you can upload your PD from MOEX. So you have a login to MOEX. But then I'm also going to create a template, because the state wants us to now indicate whether the professional development was delivered locally, regionally, at the state level, or national. Now, I don't want all teachers to have to figure out how to do this. My job is to try to make your life a little bit easier. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a template, and I'll put out a little template video like I did. Hopefully you saw the one I did on safety and advisory. I provided templates for you. I will do the same thing for professional development. I just haven't gotten there yet, and I'm waiting for a little bit more clarity on some of the things that the state's asking for, because I don't want to ask any of you to do anything more than you need to do as far as like documenting this, right? So it will include, I will tell you this, it is going to include like a 5-year span, like starting now. You don't have to go back. We're going to start moving forward. We always think moving forward. So it'll allow you to keep a running record of your SIP specific annual PD, and you'll be able to indicate who the provider was. Was this local, regional, or national? And that will be something you will have to keep. So again, so far we've had CO1, you have to have the right certifications or ACA. CO2 is that you have to keep a record of your professional development, and I'll provide a template for that, but I want to get that on your radar because that is a requirement of CTE to have industry specific professional development. So if you're new to career and technical education, things you can look out for is maybe some of your, there's different industry associations associated for each SIP code. They have regional meetings sometimes. Sometimes they have national meetings, which could be cool because with things being virtual now, you can attend a lot of things virtually. So think about, look for areas like that, because you can attend professional development virtually that's in your specific SIP code. So start looking. And then CO3. So that was, we did teacher certification, we did PD. The next one is advisory. Now, hopefully you received the last update I gave on advisory, because this is one area that did have a little bit of a change from those of you who have been. So all CTE programs are required to have an advisory committee assembled, and with that advisory committee, they hold 2 meetings. So the point of the advisory committee is they help you plan and develop and implement and promote, and they can really give, like sometimes I've had CTE teachers even use their advisory committee as leverage to say to the district, hey, listen, you need to purchase this for this program because this is what industry is saying we need, right? So instead of just, sometimes that gives you more clout, right? I used to do it. I mean, I taught CTE. I was in the classroom for 9 years teaching career and technical education. That was my entire life. And I should have actually given you my background. I apologize, but I taught in CTE for 9 years in 3 different SIP codes. So I did accounting, I did business, and I did web design. And then after that, in Utica community schools. And then after that, I stepped out and I was the CTE administrator for Utica for 4 or 5 years before I came over to the ISD. So I've seen it at all different levels. I sat in your seat. I sat as a teacher with advisors. And sometimes it was the district wanted us to teach this one thing. And I'm going, wait a minute, here's the records, here's the notes for my meeting. This doesn't make sense. This is what our industry advisors are saying. So if done properly, you can really leverage your advisory committee to get good data that can really drive your program. That's the point of it. So what's the requirement? So again, back to what do I have to do, Shannon? What do you need from me? There are, as far as the requirements, you must have an advisory committee roster. That's one. And a roster is different than your meetings. And this is the big thing that and honestly, when I was in the classroom, I did not understand this and I did not leverage it as well as I probably could have. I have seen the span of, I've seen some teachers use their advisory so effective that literally their students are graduating and literally being placed like right out there within this community. And then I have some that really don't even have one advisor. So I've seen it all around, but the most effective is you start with, okay, who are the people? Who are the people around you that are on your roster that are advising your program? And I will tell you I'm gonna go, sorry, my phone's ringing, who has to be on there. And then the other requirement is that you have to hold 2 meetings annually. So throughout a school year, 2 meetings. Usually you do one in the fall. If you're new to career and technical education and you weren't around last year, usually we have a regional meeting in the spring. So like all health teachers can get together at one time. And we usually do it here at the ISD. Obviously, we will not be having giant in-person spring advisory like in person here at the ISD. But I'm working with your CTE directors as to how we might still be able to do something regionally, but nothing is set in stone. So I don't want you to, but it shouldn't really matter because you can, for this year, count a meeting, an advisory committee meeting virtual. And if you have a strong roster, you can meet whenever you want. You can meet as many times as you want. I have one teacher who literally probably has 5, 6 advisory committee meetings a year, and they're not all super long, but it's a way to engage with them. So some of the things, when you think about who should be on your list, who's on your roster, right? Who are people that are advising your program? Could be guest speakers, like who do you ask to come in to speak to your students? Who takes your students for job shadows? Who takes them in for field trips? Who do you go to for curriculum resources? And then, you know, like think about, these are all different things your advisory roster can include. Who needs to be on it? So your actual membership, you have to have business and industry. You have to have at least one post-secondary partner. You have to have a parent. And this is the new piece, is the special population representative. This used to be under optional. Now you have to have someone who represents special populations. And then these are all recommended but not required. I did send out in that last email when I was talking about advisory, the advisory committee toolkit, but I'm going to show you at the end of this where to find all these toolkits. So if you don't have it, I can show it to you. Your chairperson must be from business and industry. Majority must be from business and industry. And this year you can use virtual. So those are just a few of the requirements around advisory. So when we talk about the roster, I'm going to go back to the roster because I'm hitting that hard only because that's what I find that teachers don't have the most. Like they'll have their meetings and they'll put who attended the meeting, which you should, on your meeting minutes, but the state will always look for your roster in addition to that. So a roster is not the same as your minutes. You can't say that enough because that's the most common error that happens. That's why when I go back to this one, it's you need meeting minutes, and a roster. So that's really 3 things. They're not all one and the same. So what fields need to be on your roster? Yes, I will define special population. Thank you for that, John. Give me 1 second because I'm going to go to it and when we go over the next slide. So member name, so the person's name, who they represent, their title, what their representation on the board. Are they considered your parent? Are they your special populations person? Are they in their contact information? They want their email and their phone. And military is not required. I'd see that in it's now if you're JROTC, then technically military falls under really big, that's the industry, right? But if it's like a business program, no, a military representation would not be required. Contact information, phone and email, and then identify who the chair is. So this is the roster that I created this to kind of help and assist you as you develop these. And I'm going to take you live to it. This is my advisory. Are you seeing the roster right now live? Thumbs up. Yeah. Okay. So at the top, you just type in your district, your school, your zip code. So for, for health, it's 51.0000 or whatever your zip code is. You type in your program serial number. You put your name, who your business chair is. You'll indicate them down here too. But I created these drop down menus. So it could be, post-secondary industry advisor, administrator, student, parent. So you can select them. You can select whether they're a chairperson. Now, when you see voting member versus non-voting member, voting member just means that essentially that's OCTE's terminology. But a voting member means it's a required member. So it's somebody that's required to be on there. It's not optional. And then you would fill in the rest, right? Down here at the bottom, what I did is I kind of color coded it. When I put everybody written in green, right, from here, these are actual voting members. These are required people, and majority has to come from industry. And then the red people are essentially optional. They're optional drop downs, right? And then over here on the side, this is the actual wording that comes from OCTE's toolkit. I just copied and pasted it in there so you have it. Now, when you come to post-secondary partner participation, and then you see the SPOPS, that's your special POPs representative, may come from many different positions. So it could be a special education teacher or a consultant. It could be a paraprofessional who works with your special population students. It could be a parent or a guardian of a special population student. But then if you're indicating, if it is a parent, let me say this, if it is a parent of a special population student and they are representing your special POPs, then you'll want to get a different parent to represent your parent person. You're not going to double up on them, okay? Family advocate. So they give you some flexibility on who this special POP rep could be. Now, going back to John's question, what is special population, right? Perkins 5 clearly defines special population, and they expanded those categories. So it's students with disabilities. It's more, so it used to be, we used to think of special pop as non-traditional, right? So girls in traditionally male dominated fields, or there wasn't very many male and traditionally female. But that's still included. So non-traditional for their field is in there. Students now with a parent in the military is now in there. Students with disabilities is now in there. There is homeless, there's foster children, there's economically disadvantaged. I think I'm hitting most of them. Those are the special population. Single, if a student is pregnant mother, they're in there. So foster care, pregnant mother, students with disability, non-traditional students. I'll show you on the state website where all the the Perkins 5 defined special population categories are, but they're pretty much the same as they used to be, with an addition of they broke out so it matches ESSA. So you have now you're homeless, you're a student of a military family. I think those were the new ones. Did that answer your question? Hopefully. So that's your special POP. It's not just narrowly focused. It's pretty broad. Okay. So when you're working within this template, and if you need me to resend it, actually I'll show you the where you can find it, but I can resend it too. Just email me. If you needed to add in, say that you get all yours in and you're I don't need all these lines. If you were to just take and select this, see how I'm just dragging on the numbers I wanted to show just for everybody who maybe isn't comfortable working in Excel. If you were to click, I'm holding down my button and dragging. I can, once they're selected, I can right click and I can delete all those. So it just kind of, it shortens it up a little bit. And I can do the same thing if I need more fields. So say this is not enough lines for me. I can highlight as many as I want, again, over here on the numbers, and I can right click and I can insert, and it would insert more cells or insert more rows. So this, you can work within this. The other thing is these drop downs, I built this so it's pulling, this drop down list is coming from this key at the bottom. So if I was to change or delete this word teacher right here at the bottom, it would, well, actually, I'll show you. So if I go in here and I'll just take out the word teacher for a second. And now I do this drop down. Notice the word teacher is gone because this data is being pulled from this key. So be careful if you're adjusting this key at all, because that's where it's pulling. And that's where it's pulling from down here too. It's pulling from right here, okay? And of course, you don't have to use this template. And I say that in the video on advisory rosters when I sent that out, but these are the fields that must be present. So if you customize and make your own roster, go ahead, but make sure these fields are present and make sure the majority comes from business and industry. So let's go back. Back to where we were. Okay, so that is advisory. When we talk about, okay, so that was the roster, right? Separate from your meetings. Now you need 2 meetings. You need meeting 1, meeting 2. So what happens at these said meetings? Well, all are different, but a lot of times you're talking about, you know, workforce needs, you're talking about maybe different professional development opportunities. You're having them look at the equipment and the curriculum that you're teaching with and getting their feedback. And I highlighted equipment right here because we actually, one of the requirements under this section for those that are new to CTE is having an equipment list. So, and that'll be something that we'll also work on second semester. You'll get more prompts from me. My goal is to walk all CTE teachers through step by step and give you small things to do each month, so it's not so overwhelming. But we will address the fact that you do have to have an equipment list that will have to be put into your SIP self-review for the state to look at. And that's the kind of thing that your advisory would talk about. What equipment is needed? What, in order to replicate the work environment. So that's kind of your meetings, right? And you would keep meeting minutes. So you schedule your meeting, maybe you have an agenda, and then someone is, usually the teacher is taking meeting minutes as evidence. Okay, so now we've went through, you have you're certified or you have an ACA, you have professional development and you're keeping track of that, and you have an advisory committee where you have 2 meetings in a roster. Now we get into the standards and the content. And you're going to see a few repetitive words, hopefully from the beginning, is we have our gap analysis and our instructional design. So again, you have your gap analysis is your standards, your segments, and we're going to find our standards and our segments in just a minute for those that are new, so you know where to find them. Then once you find your standards and your gap, then you fill out your instructional design. Now you don't have to redo your, I actually advise you not to redo your instructional design every year because you don't want to be moving that around. You want students to move through and have a stable program, right? But you have an instructional design. So that's segmenting sheet. We have a syllabus and there's requirements for a CTE syllabus. We'll go through that. And then there's student safety. These are the 4 things that now live under standards and content, CO4. this is a repeat slide from earlier. I just put it back in as a reference. Remembering your gap analysis is your segments, right? And your standards, they're defined by the state by zip code. And then your instructional design is you as a teacher laying out what your segments and standards are and reporting them back to the state. We have a question here. Are we able to see instructional designs from years past? Yes. So at the beginning of the PD, I showed you that cetusreports.com. So if you were to go to www, I'll actually put it back in the chat. And honestly, you are from East Point, and I am bringing yours to you on Monday. So just so you know, I have your instructional design from past years. So you're going to identify your gap. You're going to look through and identify your segmenting sheet. Remember, now filling out a gap. This is your standard sheet. This is a gap analysis. And at the beginning, we talked about this one happens to be for business. But let me navigate you through this really quick. And then I'm going to have you go and pull your own gap down off the website. So at least you have it. Now, most of you already have it, and most of you already have it filled out. Or you don't even realize you have it filled out if you're new, because the person before you might have already filled it out and you just don't have it. I'm specifically talking to my East Point friends. I did pull your previous gap analysis, and that's another thing we're going to work on Monday when I come there, because all of you are kind of new over there. So I'm going to bring what is there, but I still want you to find yours today, even if it's blank. Okay. So when you look at a gap analysis, I'm pointing out a few things. This red box right here talks about the knowledge, the skills. This is performance element, and this is measurement criteria. When you fill out a gap analysis, you indicate where, like the performance element, that's where you're putting your X's by. This section right here, when you open up the gap for the first time, I have this already filled in. There's X's. Right? You see my little X's? I know it's really small, so I apologize, but I just wanted to give you that 10,000 foot view. You won't have X's. This gap comes blank. So for this is saying, I'll just kind of read it to you because I know it's really small. For this one, it says, select and employ appropriate reading and communication strategies to learn and use technical concepts and vocabulary and practice. So that is a performance element, because you can see it right there as a 1. So over here is where, as a teacher, you would rank them either N, 1, 2, 3, or 4, and you'd put a little X. That's how you fill out a gap. Now, what do those N, 1, 2, 3, 4s mean? This is what they mean. So here's your rating scale. If it's an N, it means that your students are not exposed to that task. If it's a 1, then they're exposed to it. If it's a 2, then they can accomplish it with some help. If it's a 3, they can accomplish it. And if it's a 4, they can do it so well that they could teach it to somebody else, right? So your X's are going to fall along this depending on how much depth you go into. You'll also see that, like for this particular first one, if you follow me across, you'll see that this teacher ranked this particular performance element as a 3, meaning that the student can do it independently. Then if you come across here, this is just indicating, this number 12 right here is just indicating that this particular standard falls under segment 12, okay? And you'll see that moving through all of them. So what I want you to do right now, and this actually, even if you have a filled out gap analysis, I want you to do this because this is the new place that OCT is housing all of our gap analysis instead of our old navigator system. So I'm going to take this link. I'm going to put it in the chat once we get there. Use this link in the chat. And you're going to go to, this is CTE's webpage. Okay, this is, and you'll see they've now organized the gap analysis or CTE specific standards into the career clusters. So you're going to find, like if I was going to find health, if I go under science, health science, here's each zip code and the state defines zip code. So you're teaching under one of these if you're in health. If I go back, if I go to hospitality, there's culinary. If I go to human services, you'll see cosmetology. If I go to, I feel like they're missing some. Oh, no, education. There's your education. So take a minute. I want you to use that link, find your gap analysis, save it somewhere just so you have a clean copy of it. And I want you to look through, like if I'm education, it's going to come up as an Excel. And I want you to be able to identify, I'm going to zoom way out, where your segments are. What are your program segments? And then read through some of your performance elements. I'm going to give you, we're going to take 5 minutes and we're going to do that now. Okay, so as we start to come back, hopefully you're able to find your gap analysis. Again, you will get this PowerPoint, so you will have the link to this, but at this point, you've now downloaded a clean blank gap analysis if you needed it. But most of you, if you've taught in CTE in the past, you should have one and you should have it filled out already. If you're new to CTE and this is your first year, your program last year, if it was running, did have a gap analysis and it was completed and filled out. You just need to identify and locate it. And your CTE director should know where that is. Okay, so moving on. The reason that I pointed out to know what the overarching standards are is because then you take these 12, see how there's 1 through 12. On every gap analysis, there are 12 segments, every single one. Then you take it and you put it on your instructional design based on what courses make up your program. And that's why I started off by saying that. It might have felt overwhelming at first for those of you that are new, but hopefully it's starting to come together a little bit. Is that now that you have your gap analysis and you see why is marketing from 2012? That's a solid question. That is one of all of our gap analysis in CTE in the state of Michigan, unfortunately, need to be revised. 99% of them. And they're actually in the process of going through program revision right now through this grant that the state put out. So soon, these gap analysis and these standard sheets will be changing, including for marketing. But I don't want you to, you still have to use, that is the most up-to-date one that is available at the time, unfortunately, that they put out. So, but they are going through revision and you'll find that. So yeah, I think that that's way too long. That it's been way too long since it's been revised, but they are working on them right now. Okay, so now that you have the gap analysis, you have your standards sheets, is now you have to take and say, okay, well, I have 2 courses that make up my program. I have year 1, I have year 2, or I have this course and then I have this course, right? The one thing to remember is that your program in CTE, CTE is different than other electives. Other electives, sometimes you can take on their own or out of order and kind of like an a la carte type of thing. Career and technical education isn't like that. It is designed to be students are going to take this course, and then after they've gotten the content here, they're going to progress to this course, and then they're going to progress to this course. However you laid out, it's a progression, and there are prerequisites. It's not a, well, I'll dabble in this, I'll dabble in this. It's you put the instructional design together to say, Okay, if you're by trimesters, they take this course and then this and then this, and then you put what segments or standards hit in each one. The one thing that's important to know is that you can't put down segments more than once. So if I go back to that image in the beginning, so if I'm going to claim that my year 1 students are going to learn segment number 2, right, in this course, I can't put it again in year 3 because I've already identified it. So you can only put down segments one time throughout the course of the program. Melanie, the top one, the other uses segments more than once. And that is correct. So number 1 is correct. And the reason that it's correct is because if you look at this top one, I'm saying that in this semester, I am teaching segments 1, 3, 4, 9, 11, and 12. And then in this semester, I'm teaching 2, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 10. All 12 segments are represented. None of them are overlapped because you cannot overlap segments in a course. Now down here, what the error is I have segment 2 overlapping. I have segment 10 overlapping, segment 7 identified in both, and you can't do that. Okay, so good. So that's like, and whether it's a 1 year or 2 year or a 3 year, you cannot overlap and double segment. Okay, so that's your instructional design. The next section is your syllabus. So every CTE program has to have a well-defined syllabus that tells about your class. Now I put this in here, and this I'm going to kind of glaze over it a little bit, is that, you know, I always asked, usually when I'm doing this live face-to-face, I was like, what do you use your syllabus for? Like, what's the purpose of a syllabus? You know, what does it tell, you know, about your class, right? I see a lot of, and I see it not just in CTE. I have a 7th grader and a sophomore in college. So I've seen a lot of teacher syllabus come home throughout the years, right? And my pet peeve is when I have a syllabus comes home and it tells me 0 about what this child is about to learn or what this course is about. But I know all about the cell phone policy, the discipline policy, which are good. You have to have that. Don't get me wrong. I will never, as a classroom teacher, you have to have those as well. But that's your attendance policy. That's your cell phone policy. That's your discipline policy. Your syllabus is supposed to tell about what I'm about to learn. What is the requirements of this course, right? So when you're doing it, I challenge all teachers, whether they're CTE or non-CTE, take a good look at your syllabus. Your syllabus should be a clear page, should have your course description on it. Actually, I think the next one, these are the CTE requirements, so I'll just leave them up there for a minute. But this is what a syllabus should tell somebody. It should be, you know, I'm teaching, I'll use an example. When I taught web design, it would be, well, in web 1, you're going to learn how to code in HTML. You're going to learn how to code in CSS at a basic level. We're going to get in there and we're going to use the Dreamweaver program. You're going to build at least one website. You're going to use a graphics program. So all of that needed to be on that syllabus, right? So a student knows. And then my web 2 was, well, we're going to get into Flash animation, and we're like, so there's a difference. Each program, each course tells what's happening in that class. So make sure, and I'll challenge all my veteran teachers to my new teachers. It doesn't matter. Every teacher needs to go back and look and make sure, and 100% make sure you show it to a colleague or someone else before you send it out to make sure there is no typos, no grammatical errors. Because I've also seen typos on syllabus that have come in, and that is the worst reflection on your class when it comes out to parents. So just, and I do that too. honestly, sometimes you have a typo where you write the word for and you meant to put from, or you put it, and it's stupid. It's not that you don't know how to spell it. It's just that we're so programmed that when we write something, I write how I talk. So when I reread it, yeah, that sounds great. Sounds just like me. You know what I mean? And I get it. I get what I'm saying. But when somebody else reads it, they don't get it. Like, and it doesn't make sense and the words don't flow. So always have someone else like reread some of your stuff. But that's not even just CT. That's just good practice. But when it comes to your career and technical education syllabus, you have to have at a minimum, you know, the course title, your year, your contact information, your course description, and then these features. So is it a point? Is it a semester? Is it a full year credit? What are your post-secondary connections as far as, do you have articulation agreements? Are students getting any type of certification? That's only if it's applicable. Do they go off site if applicable? A lot of them don't. What work-based learning opportunities will they have? What safety training, and then leadership. And we will get into those in a moment. But it also needs to cover your standards. So what segments are being covered? We talked about segments. So if I'm going back to marketing, we're going to talk about sales. We're going to talk about price. We're going to talk about social media marketing. So what's on there? And then you put in your resources, textbooks, any supplies that they need. I did reference the toolkit of where you can find all this information, but you'll also have access to this. And then lastly on this, safety, I'm going to pick up the pace slightly to keep us on track in case there's any questions at the end. But for safety, so safety changed this year. So for teachers who were here last year and previous years, you remember that student safety used to have to be tracked at the student level. And you had to upload student names into self-review. That requirement is gone as far as student names into self-review. No longer do we have to put down and black out, for those of you who've been around a little bit, and black out student names for safety training. But you do still have to provide a list. Now for self-review, you have to have a list of all safety training associated with your program and how frequently it occurs and what date it happened this year. But with that said, that's a state requirement that you have a list of the safety trainings in the program, not tied to students. The state is not asking you to tie it to students anymore. However, this is your disclaimer. Your local district is still going to want you to, right? And it could be as simple as putting it into as like you could assign it 0 points so it doesn't go against them, or somewhere in your student data system where if you're having a student I'll use culinary, and they're in the kitchen and they are chopping things or using a knife, you want to know that those students have been trained on the proper cutting techniques, right? Because if a student goes and does something stupid or like they get hurt, you want to, for your own records, be able to say, oh, no, look at little Johnny right here. What they turned this, they were trained. And here's the date that they were trained on. So for your records and your compliance, you do want to make sure and have some type of check off to know that your students were trained on your equipment. However, you no longer have to upload student names into self-review. For this, I did the OCT put out a template that looked like this. I don't love, so a knife skills assessment would count. That is a specific, you're a culinary teacher. That is a specific safety training. There are some SIP codes that will have more than one safety training. You're going to have knife training. You might have proper, oven. I don't even know. I'm making stuff up now with culinary, but there's a lot of technical stuff or ways, dangerous stuff. I know my construction teachers have a whole litany of different, they're going to train them, safety train them on every machine. right? So that's the point of these templates. And this is the template, yeah, fire safety, first aid, yes, all of those trainings. So your safety template for OCTE is now going to look like something like this. I'm going to take you live into it, but I created it so it can be a really easy thing for you to fill out to keep for your program. So if I pull it up, this is the safety template. So you'll notice I'm trying to keep all the templates that I give to our Macomb teachers consistent with their look, right? So you have your district, you have your school, you have your zip code, you have your PSN, you have your program instructor, your name, right? Now here is the actual safety training. So let's just say knife, I'm gonna use your example, knife skills assessment. And then here, you know, all students will learn the proper way to cut, you know, you can imagine, I'm filling it all in. I'm describing what the safety training is. Now, this frequency, it could be, well, I'm doing this in the first year of the program because that's when we get it, and I'm going to repeat it as necessary. That's my frequency, no matter what year I'm in. Now for this year, I happen to do it on October 1st, right? So that's how you'd fill that out. So then I go into this next one and I would say, okay, the next one is, you know, fire safety, you know, kitchen fire safety or whatever you would put. And then you describe it. All students are going to know where this fire extinguisher is and blah, 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 right? And then when are you going to do it? What's the frequency? Or maybe this one, you know, this is advanced course only. So that's how this template works. Is there any questions on this template and how you would, hopefully you received this already in a previous video from me about safety templates, but that's how you would fill that out. Would you have to provide an example of the documentation? No. So for OCTE and for SIP self-review, and when we upload, we used to upload into CTE Navigator. I'll talk about GEMS very briefly at the end. The only thing that will need to be uploaded for the state anymore for SIP self-review is this document where you're giving them the overview. You're not tying students to it. However, I'll go back to what I said before, your districts are still going to want some, you need to keep for your records and your liability purposes, just for your records that when these students have received it. That makes sense? Let me go back to here. Okay, so that's safety. I'm going to skip this because you don't need that right now. Okay, so CO5. Now these next few I'm going to go even quicker through because we're still waiting on guidance from OCTE about what's going to be required. So you'll see, you'll see work-based learning template coming soon. I don't have that yet because I want to make sure that I create it in a way that's like great for you guys. But basically by the end of all programs, each student must complete at least one work-based learning experience. Now, when I say work-based learning experience, everybody thinks at first, your first glance is that students have to have an extended externship. Not really. Work-based learning comes in many forms, right? So, and the way that the state defines it is going to be career awareness, career exploration, preparation, or training. And there's different examples of each one, right? And the teacher toolkit, which I'll show you where to find that at the end, those are the pages that it references. So when it goes back to, okay, Shannon, what do I need? This is what's required. Teachers are going to create a work-based learning template that outlines all work-based learning in their program and what category it falls. Just think of it as the same thing as the safety template. You know, you're just doing all your safety throughout your program. The work-based learning template is going to operate very similar, where you're going to take your program and it's not at the student level for OCTE, like for your upload there. You don't need it for your files there. But here's the caveat, and this is the change for Perkins 5, is OCTE is requiring that your directors, your CTE directors, upload at the student level each student's work-based learning and what they did. Now, the reason I'm not going too much deeper on this right now is because tomorrow is the fall update from the state, tomorrow and Thursday. They have not yet defined what this should look like as far as this upload. So I'm not bringing it to you yet. You will get this from me probably in December, November, December. So information will be coming on this, but I didn't want to give out half information. So essentially, you will create a template that identifies all your work-based learning for your program. That is for sure. And your CTE directors will be asking you what level each student, but I don't know what it's going to look like yet. Does that make sense? Those two things are going to happen. So start thinking about how you can get work-based learning in front of your students, but all students do have to have it and we do have to track it, and templates will be coming. And that is the same with when I click over to leadership. Leadership, the nice thing is, again, a template will be coming soon. I'm going to create a template. It'll follow that same protocols, right? Is that all students are supposed to be provided with opportunities to demonstrate leadership. That's always been in there. That's not new this year. But what is new this year, which is kind of cool, is that it's following that same progression where you just have to list as a program what leadership opportunities exist, and you don't have to do it. You don't have to do student lists anymore. Okay. So again, I'm going to create a new template for teachers to use to say, this is my program and this is the leadership opportunities that are there. You no longer need to tie it to student names, but you're tying it to opportunities that students have. So opportunities could include CTSOs, so your Skills USA, your DECA, your HOSA, your BPA, but it doesn't solely have to be a CTSO. It could be projects and activities that allow students to demonstrate leadership roles. In these roles, these leadership roles, OCTE as defined. And this is kind of what they look like. Your goal for leadership is to move students along this spectrum. So, you know, they could be doing leadership things for individual, building their own character, right? They could be part of a team member. They could be a project manager. And you're going to see that the template that I create, competition. So competition, the question was, so is competitive is not mandatory. Technically, competition was never mandatory. Competition was a way that a lot of CTE teachers, and rightly so, because a lot of times it counted. A lot of times when you have a competition in and of itself fosters leadership, because a student is usually like some type of project leader. They have a role on this particular competition. When you look at DECA, Skills USA, they're competing, but within that, that CTSO, there's officers and there's defined roles. So a competition was a part of it, but it was never necessarily mandatory. So I had like some education programs who their leadership component was that those students who were in that education general program, they hosted and put on around Christmas time this event for parents to bring their students, drop them off so the students could go Christmas shopping. And during that event, the students organized what the children would be doing at that time, but it was all student led. That's leadership just as much as a competition is. So competitions in and of themselves were never mandatory. They were just sometimes an easy way to show these different levels of participation. Does that make sense? So competitions are, no, they're technically not mandatory, right? They're an easy way to show leadership sometimes. But when you look at when the template comes, which the leadership template, I'll give you the timeline of when I'm going to have all these ready. You're going to see probably a drop down where you indicate at what level the student, what level of leadership the student is able to get to. But again, I want to get some clarifying things from OCTE as far as leadership. So we know that we have student safety, we have work-based learning, and we have leadership that all have to, and you have everything for advisory, you have everything for safety. I will be sending you something for work-based learning and for leadership. Equity and access, I mean, this is really, I don't want to belittle, or not belittle, that's not the right word, make this one's, it's an easy one, usually for a lot of our districts. We usually don't have a challenge here because just in and of our nature, we are accessible. CTE is accessible, especially in Macomb. We've never had really an issue with this. But accessibility, it deals with equity of access. So your room arrangements for students with disabilities, can they get around the room? Is the classroom curriculum and materials free of bias? And is your recruitment strategies free of bias and represent diversity? So these are things when in December, I'm going to do specifically a SIP self, like, so what do I upload for into each of these sections? What documents do I want to save? For accessibility, for room arrangement, it would be take a picture of your room from different angles. Get the wheelchair from the front office and push it up to a desk or have a desk in there that shows accessibility. Take a picture of it. Take those pictures, put them all on a Word document with captions because they're going to require captions now for any pictures you upload. But, you know, just showing it, you can do that with pictures. Curriculum, it could be, you know, some scanned copies of your curriculum. But I'm going to, and then if you have recruitment strategies or career flyers or, you know, flyers for your program, all of that would be equity and access. But again, especially for my first year teachers, for this one, I don't want you to worry about this one right now, because this one, a lot of your district most likely has all this already taken care of. So I don't want you to worry about this right now. I'm more concerned with the program side for you guys. And then the last one, yes, the last one is post-secondary connection. So secondary, so all of our programs, like what does post-secondary connection mean? It means a linkage between your program and what students do next. And to be honest, I think this is one of the areas, this is my focus area for the year for our programs, because I think that as a county, all of our programs could do better here. I know when I was a teacher, I could have done better here. We didn't have, program of study is now a requirement. If you remember, walk back with me last year and in previous years, when we would go into our SIP self-review, you could pick like one of the following. Not anymore. This year, you must have a completed program of study as well as an articulation agreement. Okay, that's a requirement. Now, in order to help teachers, some of this falls on me too. It's going to fall on me to start, and then you're going to pick it up from there. So I'm working with Macomb Community College right now to update our articulation agreement process. So there's nothing you need to do right there at the moment. And I'm also working to develop brand new program of studies for all of your programs. So it shows career progression. So I'm going to do the post-secondary fill-in, and then I'm going to give it to you, and you're going to fill in your component of it. So, and I'll show you what that's going to look like, but we're going to work on this. This is going to be for all of us a second semester project. So again, I'll go back to, I am going to be with you guys every step of the way for each of these, for all these transitions, and I'm going to get you the information that you need. So just watch for any of those from me. So when I say that, this is what I mean. This document right here shows the timeline, and I should just open it up so you can see it a little bit better. Let me go here. I'm going to blow up on it a little bit. Okay, so I created this really for myself, for teachers, and for CT directors, because there are so many changes, is that here's you, teachers. So in September, you need to make sure your syllabus, your instructional design, we did the safety training. Here is where we talked about advisory rosters. So you'll notice if I look at all the things that we talked about today, just to kind of wrap it up. In November, you're going to get a video from me that walks through what you need to do for work-based learning. And I'm going to give you the template. And then in December, I'm going to give you guidance on the SIP self-review, right? Then in January, we're going to talk about how to capture that student level work-based learning. Then in February, we're going to start doing our program of study documents and customizing. In March, we're going to make sure our equipment lists are up to date in our professional development, and you'll have the templates by then. In April, we're going to document our student leadership. And then in May, that's when we're going to upload into GEMS. So do you see how we're taking the year and we're spreading it out, right? I don't want any of you to feel super overwhelmed that, oh my gosh, there is so much to get in order for CTE. There is, I'm not going to lie. CTE has a lot of requirements that maybe others don't. But with that said, we're chunking it out in a way that will allow everyone to be successful at the end of the year without being overwhelmed. So I'm going to keep this up to date. This is going to be linkable. Your CT directors have this. You might have seen it. They might have already even sent it out to you. So that's our timeline. This basically, when it comes to review, why do we do all this? We do it because there is a self-review process that we walk through. The ISD, myself, I am required to audit 20% of our programs annually. And then the state comes about every 5 years, but it's really on a risk assessment. And I'm going to go, this is not important right now. The one thing that this screen might look familiar to you that were here last year. We have always uploaded all of these documents that we're just talking about. We've uploaded into this thing called CTE Navigator. That's a screenshot of it. No more. As of this year, there's a new platform. No teachers know how to use it yet, and I don't want any teachers in it yet. I'm not pushing that on you guys yet. We're going to get everything in order. And then when we have everything, we'll put it into GEMS. Okay, so just know that there is a new system that we're going to be uploading things into. We're going to work throughout this year to get all our ducks in a row. And then at the end of the year, I will train you on how to get things up into GEMS. Okay, but there is a new system. This last slide, again, you'll get it, so I'm not taking you through it. This is just a resource slide. This is going to take you to CTIS reports. This is a curriculum website specifically for CTE that could be helpful. This is OCTE's website. The teacher certification, it's right there. So if you need that teacher certification information, there's your link. And that's pretty much, I threw through that last section because I just want to make sure I had time to answer any questions if you have them. And to kind of get you guys out a little bit early. I know we're supposed to go until 2:30, but I'm sure 2:20 is good too. So again, I'm Shannon Williams. I am your ISD CTE consultant, and I'm also your CPID 40 administrator and your Region 16 administrator. So if you go to any professional developments and they say, check with your CPID or check with your region, that's me. And this is my email. This is my direct number to my office. So if you have, beyond this point, my job as a CT consultant at the ISD is to help you be successful and to help our teachers and to help our directors. So please ask any questions that you might have. If some come up after this, reach out to me. But I do want to give you an opportunity, anyone at this time. I was trying to answer questions as we went, but does anyone have any additional questions right now before we jump off?